Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughn Manor, where Roger and I have returned. Because it's Wednesday, that means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week, we're talking about Old Shellhead. That's right, we're talking about Iron Man. Iron Man. Everybody loves Iron Man. Of course, the Iron Man we're talking about today is not the Iron Man that you probably are thinking of. When most people think of Iron Man nowadays, usually they think about Iron Man from those awesome movies where Iron Man was totally awesome and, totally cool and everybody loves Iron Man. When I was a kid, Iron Man was more of a second string superhero. He wasn't nearly as popular as, say, Spider-Man or Captain America even, or the Hulk or Thor. He really wasn't as popular as a lot of other Marvel superheroes. We liked him though. Iron Man was a badass. That he was. Cool character Iron Man, because this is a guy who made himself a superhero. He gave himself superpowers, not by training like Batman did. This guy started off a genius, and with his genius, he gave himself superpowers and made himself one of the most powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe. Iron Man is a heavy hitter, and always has been. So, a great character. But the story we're talking about today is called Demon in a Bottle. The edition I have is very, very old. This is from 1989. This same collection that I hold in my hands has been reprinted with the title Demon in a Bottle, because it's a series of issues, I think there are 8 issues in here, that tell the story of Tony Stark descending into alcoholism. This is not available at the moment in an Epic collection, unfortunately, probably because it's the one Iron Man set of stories that's been in print for years and years and years. It's always been in print, I think, for decades. So this will probably, the Epic collection that contains this will probably be the very last Iron Man Epic collection printed. We'll probably have to wait a while for this, unfortunately, just because you can get it pretty easily. When I was a kid, Iron Man was known as the drunk superhero or the alcoholic superhero. He was the superhero that, well, I wouldn't trust Tony Stark to park my bike in the garage, let alone fly around in a super powerful superhero suit. And I felt that way because I read this series of stories in the Iron Man comic book. The stories that are reprinted in this. This is written by David Michelinie. The artwork is by John Romita Jr. and Bob Layton. And the artwork in this is really, really good. We start off, Iron Man looks badass in this series of stories. He just looks awesome. And we start off with a story where Iron Man goes up against the Submariner, which is a good contest because the Submariner is another heavy hitter. He can go toe to toe with Iron Man easily. Submariner is really, really powerful. So we get a battle between Iron Man and the Submariner. The story, which takes a couple issues to tell, isn't really that important to the whole story that's told in this collection, except for a couple things. First of all, when Tony Stark is on the plane, he asks for some booze, and the stewardess is like, haven't you had enough? You've been really... He's like, yeah, bring me more. So even at the beginning of this story, David Michelinie is showing you, hey, Tony Stark's starting to drink too much. Also, another thing that happens in this story is Iron Man's suit starts to malfunction. And this is something that is starting to happen, and it happens right here. Iron Man's suit mysteriously is just starting to malfunction. At any moment, something weird can happen with his suit. And he can't figure out what the heck's going on. Why is my suit starting to go haywire? But it is. But he's Tony Stark, so he figures, he'll get it figured out. Also, we get a retelling of Iron Man's origin story in the midst of this larger story. And for one issue, Carmen Infantino does the pencils. Carmen Infantino, who is known more for the Flash, for the Silver Age Flash. He wrote all of those Silver Age Flash issues. By this time in the late 70s and the early 80s, Carmen Infantino had started to develop kind of an odd style. If you've read any of those old Marvel Star Wars issues, you know what I'm talking about. But he does a pretty good job with this issue, where we get to see clunky old gray Iron Man as he was in his origin story when he first showed up in the Marvel Universe. So we get a nice retelling of Iron Man's origin. We get to see all of Iron Man's outfits there and the evolution of his armor. And we also get Justin Hammer. Justin Hammer is the villain of this piece. I think it was Justin, right? I can't remember. I think it was Justin Hammer. I could be wrong, but I think that was him. And he's drawn to look exactly like Peter Cushing, which is weird. But he's drawn to look exactly like Peter Cushing from the old Hammer horror films. Because he's Justin Hammer. Get it? Anyway, which, they didn't have the right, really, to use his likeness, did they? Don't you have to pay for that? Anyway, they made Justin Hammer look exactly like Peter Cushing, which, we all thought was awesome because all us kids liked Peter Cushing from those old Frankenstein and Dracula movies. And as I said, Iron Man does look awesome, even though he can't control his armor because things are really starting to go wrong. So he tests himself out, and he's trying to figure it all out. Meanwhile, we get a lot of Iron Man villains that start to show up in the story. Now, one thing about Iron Man villains is that most of Iron Man's villains are pretty lame. At least they were at this time. There were a couple cool ones, but there were a lot of lame villains. And they all show up in this story. But Iron Man, again, starting to drink too much, trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with his armor. But things are not going totally wrong just yet. But then I'm going to spoil a bunch of stuff in this story. I'm pretty much going to spoil the whole thing. Sorry. But then we have him with this ambassador to a country that doesn't exist. So Iron Man, he's pretending, of course, to be an employee of Stark International. Nobody knows in the comic books at the time that Tony Stark and Iron Man were the same guy. Tony Stark was a secret identity. Not like in the movies where he gives it all away right away. In this, Iron Man is hanging out with this ambassador, and they're taking some photos, and Iron Man's hanging out here with the ambassador. And then the most shocking thing happens. I remember when I first read this, I gasped. Little Mike gasped when this happened. His repulsor ray goes off. It's one of those goofy malfunctions that he probably should have paid more attention to. And literally just rips a hole right through this poor guy. Just immediately kills him in front of all of these people who were taking pictures. So the whole world sees Iron Man kill this guy. After which Iron Man just stands around like, damn, I just killed that dude. But of course he didn't really kill him. It was just this strange malfunction in his suit. I didn't do it. I don't know what's going on. So, of course, he should have been immediately arrested. But the police know right away, this guy can mop the floor with us. We really can't arrest Iron Man if he doesn't want to be arrested. And guess what? He doesn't want to be arrested. And so, he just he just kills this guy literally in front of everybody and just flies away or goes away. You know, what are you going to do? I'm Iron Man and I don't feel like coming in. I have to figure out what's going on. You know, it wasn't me who killed that guy. No, I have to go figure it out. I'll see you guys. See you later. And so, you know, he takes off. Now, this causes Tony Stark to, you know, get a little stressed out. And that's why you next see Tony Stark look like this. Yes, been hitting the bottle a little hard, old Tony Stark. So he makes himself look like a complete, unshaven, untidy bum. Tony Stark takes a turn in this story. So, one thing about Tony Stark in this story is that, first of all, if you're only familiar with Tony Stark from the movies where he has this great personality and he's totally fun to watch and seems like a guy you'd want to hang out with, in the comic book, not so much. I did like Tony Stark when he first showed up in Iron Man. Those early stories written by Stan Lee were not better written than this. I mean, they weren't. But I liked the character better. He seemed more sympathetic. Because when Iron Man first showed up, he was always just a breath away from death. He had a piece of shrapnel in his heart. And the only thing that was keeping it from killing him was this Iron Man chest piece, which he had to wear all the time. So he could never have a normal life. He couldn't let himself get into a regular relationship because he literally could die at any minute. So he was hanging around, living his life knowing any second he could be gone. Which, you know, sort of tormented him, but he tried to make the best of it. He became, you know, he kept up with his Iron Man identity to do the best that he could with the time he had left, however much time that was. It was an interesting situation for a superhero to be in, and it made for an interesting character. And he seemed kind of noble, you know, the way he was dealing with it. The character here, first of all of that stuff is in the past by this point. And the character in this just seems like, for a lot of it, Tony Stark seems like an entitled ass who's a real jerk and is a drunk, you know. So he's, you know, a jerk. He's not really likable and totally unreliable, as you will see. So Tony Stark is in this situation. He has to figure out what the heck happened to his armor, what's going on with it. The whole world thinks he's a killer, and he has to, you know, he has to prove that he wasn't. He ends up on Justin Hammer's houseboat. Justin Hammer has this giant houseboat. It's pretty cool. If you're rich, you can have a gigantic houseboat too, just like Hammer. And while he's there, he escapes, you know, from being a prisoner from Hammer, manages to get hold of his Iron Man outfit. It seems like every lame Iron Man villain in the world is on this boat, brought there by Justin Hammer to kill Iron Man. But Iron Man's like, no, man, screw you. And this is a totally awesome image of Iron Man. And it's been, you know, copied and put on t-shirts and put every place else because it's a great image by John Romita Jr., who, like I said, just does a stellar job in these issues. And this is a great moment. I mean, Iron Man just tears apart all of these villains because he's got their number. He's fought them before. And he, you know, his Iron Man outfit, he makes it more powerful all the time. So he pretty much just takes him out in this awesome battle scene. Also, why he's here, he learns, of course, that, surprise, surprise, Justin Hammer is the one who's been manipulating his suit from a distance and causing him to do things like, you know, kill ambassadors and stuff like that. So he takes care of all this business. He takes care of Hammer, but then he's still stressed out because he gets back, you know, he tells everybody, hey, it wasn't me. I didn't kill this guy, so he's exonerated. But the public at large, like this little girl, they still believe he's a killer because people still saw him kill this guy. And so, they just don't trust Iron Man. People don't trust Iron Man. And to be frank, would you? I mean, he literally killed that guy, or seemed to, and then just took off. He just took off. I mean, there were no repercussions for this. There was no investigation that had anything to do with Iron Man. He just flew off. He just took off. What are you going to do? I'm Iron Man. Tough. I've got Avengers clearance. So a couple ambassadors die once in a while. Hey, wasn't me. Take my word. It's that kind of thing. So public at large is like, I don't trust this guy. Who is this guy anyway? Remember, nobody at this point knows that he's Tony Stark. So he's really stressed out. So he drinks more and more, and he becomes more of an ass. And he's such an ass that he starts being verbally abusive with Jarvis, the Avengers butler, Jarvis, and the employee of Tony Stark forever. And he's such a dick to Jarvis that eventually Jarvis just quits and says, "Sorry, man, I'm out of here. You're too much of a jerk to deal with." Leaving Iron Man alone with his bottle, he broods, he holds his helmet, he looks at his helmet, brooding. And he decides, what would be really cool? What if I got totally drunk? And this is a great panel. I mean, you could say that this is a rather silly image, only I've seen drunks who look just this ridiculous. So he gets really drunk and decides to go out and, do some superhero stuff. Forgetting, to open the window, just flies right through it. So, is drunk driving is bad enough, but a drunk Iron Man in a super powerful Iron Man suit, that's even worse than drunk driving, probably. You could probably get in a lot of trouble if you're a drunk superhero. And at this point, it's really, really, really hard to sympathize with Tony Stark. Because not only has he been an abusive ass, not only is he totally unlikable and unreliable, now he's downright dangerous, flying around in his Iron Man suit. And of course, immediately he screws things up. There's a train wreck. He decides to help. And he eventually just messes things up because he's drunk and he doesn't know what he's doing. And it's a disaster. He causes a disaster. The authorities had this already in hand, and he goes and causes an ecological disaster because he's drunk. And so he comes home and he's like, man, maybe flying around drunk as Iron Man wasn't the best thing to do. Yeah, it probably wasn't. And also, he finds out at this point that Jarvis has, not only did he quit, he had to sell his shares of Stock International, or whatever Tony Stark's company is, because I think it was his mother needed to have an operation. He couldn't ask Tony for the money because Tony was being such an ass. So he just sold some stock, and he sold it to these shifty, well, he needed to get a loan. That's what it was. He needed to get a loan. So he got it from these sneaky loan agents, and then had to sell his stock to pay for it. And Tony Stark decides, you know what? I'm gonna pay a visit to this unscrupulous loan agent. Now, I don't think this loan agent, he might be unscrupulous, but I don't think he actually committed any crimes. But Iron Man does. So Iron Man goes to this guy's office and just starts threatening him and starts busting up the furniture, just breaking stuff, pretty much saying, hey, look at me break up all of your stuff. Maybe I'll break you the same way I break your stuff. because might makes right if you're Iron Man. So basically, he just is acting like a mob enforcer. You know, again, kind of hard to sympathize with this guy. But it turns out that he sold all the stocks anyway to S.H.I.E.L.D., wasn't it? I think he sold it to S.H.I.E.L.D. And so Tony Stark reaches for the bottle again, but you know what? He puts the bottle down, and now he's going to go get his stock back. And you know what? I might have challenges, but I'm going to, stop being a drunk all of a sudden here in one page, and go and get my company back. That's how it ends. Now, that wasn't really the end, because he kind of had trouble with alcohol for years and years. But that was the initial story. And it was a good story, and it was well told. David Michelinie, he could be a really good comic book writer. He can also, sometimes you read his stories and they're like, this is really good. Sometimes you read his stories and you think he's just on cocaine. Because, how did he come up with this stuff? And what is he thinking with some of his stories? But very often he's good. And I think this is a good story. And I think it's told well. And I don't think there's a lot of great stuff in it. And I think the art is fantastic. Tony Stark is just such a jerk. That's the problem with this story, is that it's incredibly hard to sympathize with the main character. And as badass as Iron Man is when he's in his outfit, underneath, he's Tony Stark, the entitled drunken idiot. And that character, at least as he was portrayed here, to me, that's the issue here with this story. I think it's interesting that they did bring up alcoholism in a superhero comic. I just think the way it was done, it just makes Tony Stark look like just such an ass. But well worth reading, I must say. And I'll shut up now. I've been going on long enough. I will catch you next time.